Jai Hind, Namaste. I welcome you all to the day's program by Center for Knowledge Sovereignty, CKS.
The theatre command concept will also probably maybe announced, I don't know. It's only guesswork.
Qualitative and discernible enhancement in the combat potential of the armed forces.
120 Muslims in a particular battalion, there would be a mall to give it. So the aim is to be able to provide
draw from the media, and that is all I am depending on. This may have inadvertently resulted in seemingly good decisions.
Deny that. We need the military has to transform from a force to a power. Despite everything we have.
For knowledge sovereignty and my own behalf, extend sincere thanks to today's event speaker.
Jai Hind, Namaste. I welcome you all to the day's program by Center for Knowledge Sovereignty, CKS. CKS is an established think tank and has been spreading awareness about data sovereignty and cybersecurity at strategic, political, and national levels. CKS is a non-partisan nationalistic think tank which has been spreading intellectual content with focus on the spheres of technology, public policy, and research. CKS is honored and privileged to host from our platform a very special program, Integrated Theatres, Contours and Structures. Our first speaker, Lieutenant General D.B. Shekatkar, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, retired Indian Army, has served in the Indian Army for 40 years. He was commissioned in the Maratha Light Infantry in 1963 and is considered one of the most leading authorities in handling anti-insurgency operations in the Northeast. He has been a very integral part of routing out militancy in J&K Valley, and he got over 200 militants to surrender with their arms. He's an expert in psychological warfare and perspective planning. He commanded corps in Arunachal Pradesh and has interacted with the Chinese on cross-border disputes. He has been part of military delegations in talks with the Chinese. With his vast experience in different sectors, he easily modernized the infantry's outlook during his tenure as Commandant of Infantry School in Mo. He's a highly decorated soldier with Vishishta Sena Medal, Ati Vishishta Sena Medal, and Param Vishishta Sena Medal. He's also an academician and has written several papers on policy. He is called to speak in various forums, and he's got a tremendous sense of humor. Over to you, General Shekatkar.
Thank you, madam. Thanks a lot for a very kind and generous introduction. There are much better qualified people than me in this webinar today. It's a pleasure. It will be an honor to listen to them. We have Air Marshal Soman with us. We have Admiral Sekhar, we have Lieutenant General Bhatia, and we have Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. Incidentally, General Bhatia and General Kulkarni and myself, we worked together on this committee, the so-called Committee of Experts, which was appointed by the Government of India in 2016 and which made the recommendation for the appointment of CDS, creation of theatre commands, and almost 187. As a result, we already have CDS in place. The Prime Minister announced it from the Red Fort, and hopefully this year again we may hear some announcement on 15th of August about some further reforms. Maybe the theatre command concept will also probably maybe announced, I don't know. It's only guesswork. Therefore, you will have much more wider experience speaking to you and sharing their views. Do we need theatre command? That is the basic thing. When in committee we were discussing the need for theatre command, we realized the way the world is changing, the geostrategy, geopolitics, geoeconomics, everything is changing day by day. And we examined the requirement to have theaterization of our military forces and our area of interest, area of influence, and area of concern. That's how this concept came up. We examined how the theatre command concept came in United States of America. How did they evolve? They didn't have this concept till 1987 or 86 at that time. Because we'll be concerned about it. The Joint Chief of Staff of the US Army, after the Vietnam War, he was addressing very senior commanders of the United States Armed Forces. And he said, and I quote, it is recorded, if you had fought the war as hard as you fought among yourself on theaterization and other issues, the outcome of the war would have been different. Thank God, we are not fighting the war, nor are we trying to delay the things. We are discussing, do we need theatre commands? And if we need theatre command, what should be the concept? What should be composition? What should be the responsibility? Look at the problem which had taken place in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, and they were all dealt by the theater command of the United States of America. Because you may recall, Americans have not fought a war on their own land except 9/11. There also, the air power was used. It was used in the wrong way, but the terrorists used the air power. They did not send a foot soldier or a terrorist with AK-47 rifle to create a problem. Thereafter, the concept kept on changing. I am working nowadays on another theme as to why the large armies do not win small wars. See what has happened in Afghanistan. They are getting away at midnight. See what happened to another superpower, the so-called superpower in Afghanistan, the Soviet Union. And therefore, and the key to winning the war has always been and will continue to be to attack and destroy the center of the gravity of the enemy's endurance to wage a war. I repeat, the center of gravity of your adversary or enemy to wage a war and to win a war. And therefore, in 21st century, the center of gravity will no longer be merely the destruction of army or the land forces on the battlefield, but the infrastructure, the factories, the economy, the cyber system, the governing mechanism, and the overall national war endurance. If you destroy these, then your adversary or enemy will not be able to fight a war for a long time. I come back to the first question I mentioned. Why did terrorists decide to use the commercial airliner to attack United States on 9/11? They were not short of options, but that shows the power of the air power. The airland battle strategy formed and based on massive airstrike by NATO forces has changed the total concept of war. Killing of commander of the Revolutionary Guard, nuclear scientists, top people by using drone or drone technology. That is also air power. Therefore, in my understanding, it will make no difference who is outnumbering or who is outnumbered. What will decide the outcome is whether the enemy's follow-on echelons which support the war can be prevented from advancing and joining the battlefield in the forward areas. And therefore, we need a long reach of the air arm. Same goes to the Indian Navy also. And a combination of all these three will be working in our favor. The Indian Air Force, in any future conflict, will launch critical air attacks and isolate, I repeat the word isolate, the tactical battle area, that is the forward areas. I'm sure General Bhatia and General Kulkarni will speak more on that. Defend the homeland from enemy's air attack, will have the Air Defense Command. And therefore, we need the unity of command structure, integration and utilization of all the elements of power. And when keeping the same thing in view, the theater command concept was adopted in the United States. There were problems. There were a large number of problems. It was not always easy. But today, the system has stabilized. They are working well. They are taking care of the entire world. And it proves the point which in our committee we discussed and we recommended that reforms in the large military are neither easy nor quick. It takes time to create, refine, and imbibe the new doctrines. And we are facing a similar situation in India too. I will not go into detail, the other speakers will be speaking. My next point for your kind consideration is there is a difference between modernization and expansion. They are totally different. You can modernize without expanding the armed forces, but your expansion will be of no use if you do not modernize yourself. So modernization and expansion will go in hand in hand. But in 2015, while addressing the Combined Commanders Conference, Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, mentioned that we have to discuss between the two, we have to pick up the two. There's a scope, there's a limitation on expansion, because there are budgetary constraints, there are financial constraints. Therefore, he recommended that, and this committee was probably the outcome of that. Some committees in past have recommended these issues, theaterization, but the theaterization, as we are going to discuss today in our concept, has been recommended by the committee of experts. Unfortunately, in India, a perception is being created that army may become too powerful. I request your kind consideration. All are equals. Everybody will be powerful. It is the combined power of India's armed forces and India as a nation which will deter our adversary or the enemy. They use the word, oh, army is going to dominate. Nobody can dominate anybody. not in 21st century. So the domination concept which you hear on television sets, in newspaper you read, you see in social media, some of the self-styled experts who keep passing comments. I think they should be kind to themselves and to the nation. And I once again repeat, nowhere in the world, the defense reforms have come easily. There has been always a resistance, different quarters. Resistance could be from the political leadership, it could be from the governing mechanism, it can be from within the forces, it can be from the financial resources, and so on. So today, allow me to speak and to confirm once again, while we cannot ignore, I repeat the word, we cannot ignore or undermine the importance of the Army and Navy, the Air Force will probably prove to be a war winning factor. And that is why the theaterization has to take into account. Finally, just take for example, see what is happening in Afghanistan in last 1 week. Assuming if the United Nations or the world power request India to create a suitable environment for the governing mechanism to function, who will reach there first? Who will go? So therefore, the concept of theaterization itself will need a change in India. Our Western theater, particularly, may have to extend to Afghanistan and maybe slightly beyond. It doesn't mean that physically go and occupy. No. I repeated the word, our area of concern, our area of influence, and our area of interest. They will come in that order. So we may be touching the Central Asian republics, maybe seeking the help from Iran and from other countries. And therefore, the concept of theaterization will require a relook. And that is why we are here. I think I'll stop here and request Madam to take on and invite Air Marshal Soman to please give his views to all of us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, General Shekatkar. I am now going to introduce Air Marshal Soman. Air Marshal Soman, PVSM, AVSM, VM, retired from the Indian Air Force. He was commissioned in the flying branch of the Indian Air Force in December 1976 and has more than 3,400 hours of flying on fighter aircraft. In his illustrious career of 4 decades, Air Marshal Soman held many important field appointments, which include commanding officer of a fighter squadron, chief flying instructor at Flying Instructor School, chief operations officer at Srinagar during Operation Parakram, and air officer commanding of a premier IAF base. In staff appointments of air ranks, he served as assistant defense advisor at the High Commission of India, Dhaka, and at Air Headquarters, Delhi, served as Principal Director Operations Space and Principal Director Flight Safety. He was AD Commander in WAC and was Senior Air Staff Officer in Southwestern Air Command, Gandhinagar. Just before retirement in 2015, he held a prestigious appointment of AOC in C of Western Air Command. Over to you, Air Marshal Soman.
Thank you, Deepa, and I would like to thank CKS for having invited me to speak at this forum. And since we have time constraints, I think I will get down to my talk straight away. Now, as warfare evolves and progresses into multi-domain operations, the significance and need of theaterization will enhance to enable integrated and synergized operations. There is a misplaced impression that the Air Force is not in favor of theaterization. That hopefully has been put to rest with the leadership clarifying that the Air Force is not against theaterization. But what the Air Force seems to have reservations on are the methodology and the urgency for establishment of theater. So it believes that there is a need to get the architecture right, wherein post-theaterization, there should be a qualitative and discernible enhancement in the combat potential of the armed forces. Otherwise, it would be an exercise in futility. Additionally, we may disrupt the present system, which despite its imperfections, is still functional. However, what also needs to be noted is that theaterization is not a silver bullet that will mask individual service inefficiencies and resolve inter-service contentious issues. Amalgamating just the individual service structures in an integrated whole through theaterization will not develop the military effectiveness that is required to deter and dissuade our adversary. Now, coming to the topic for the panel discussion, the subject is more oriented towards the form, the shape, and the architecture of the integrated theatre commands. The DMA tasking too is on similar lines. That is to facilitate restructuring of military commands for optimal utilization of resources by bringing about jointness in operations, including through the establishment of joint stroke theatre commands. Now, there are three elements in the tasking, namely restructuring, resources, and jointness. What has happened is there is an extra emphasis on restructuring. There is little effort towards measures ensuring optimal utilization of resources and promoting jointness, which are the foundational blocks on which the entire edifice of theatres needs to be erected. I will elaborate on the two shortfalls. Optimal utilization of resources would to a large extent depend on whether the resources in the first place were acquired to cater to the operational necessities or were accretions to fulfill aspirational goals of the services. The fact that prior to every crisis, there is a scramble by all the services to meet their critical needs indicates that things are amiss. This clearly establishes the absence and the need of a national security and a military strategy to ensure crisis acquisitions are avoided. The military strategy would determine the contingencies that the military would need to address and would shape the force structures and the military wherewithal that would be required. In that respect, we have certainly placed the cart before the horse by deciding military structures ahead of articulating a national security strategy. As regards jointness, besides the physical structures that provide the linkages and interfaces, jointness is largely dependent on the state of mind. Favorable mindsets are generated through establishment of trust and faith. Trust within the services is generated by acquiring knowledge and understanding of each other's strengths, capabilities, doctrines, tenets, and employment philosophies. Trust enhances confidence levels among the services in terms of operational expectations and certainty of response and desired outcomes. In modern warfare, each service, by virtue of its unique capabilities and core competencies, play both a supporting and a supported role depending on the operational scenario and the tasking. These roles are interchangeable and do not by any means depict service primacies. Also, jointness is not a case of amalgamating and bringing sameness and uniformity within the services, but is an exploitation of the unique core competencies that emerge due to the separateness and the individualities of the respective services. So jointness, in the true sense, should enable us to exploit the full potential of each service. Respect of faith also matters in conditioning mindsets. An example at the personal and institutional level will elucidate. In an army battalion, there are personnel of different religious denominations. Each faith is given the utmost respect. The personnel are permitted to worship as per their faith at the battalion worship places or the unit MMGs. But when these guys stand side by side for battle, they are inseparable, despite their different faiths, and are a tight-knit force. In the case of the institutions, like the services, it is the same. The only difference is that the objects or altars of worship are now the doctrines, the tenets, and the employment philosophies in which the combatants have been schooled. Now, to ignore the institutional faith in indivisibility of air power or the attribute of flexibility through ad hoc decisions on setting up an air defense command can unhinge the faith that is so crucial for jointness. It does not mean a mere amalgamation of all into a purple force, but exploiting the strengths that each service brings to the table by virtue of their medium-related core competence. Analyzing the present construct that has been envisaged for the 5 theatres, I have 4 observations. The first pertains to the establishment of an integrated air defense command. The implementation was through a decree rather than through consultations and deliberations. while in theory it made a great argument to integrate all the AD resources of the three services, the consequences were not thought through and would be debilitating, to say the least, for the Air Force. The Air Defense Command will functionally split the Air Force down the middle along defensive and offensive lines. In this regard, what is amusing is that the Air Defense Command was not recommended by the Kargil Review Committee, nor the group of ministers, nor the Naresh Chandra Committee, nor the General Shekatkar Committee, nor was it mooted by the IAF, being the domain specialist. It was a fanciful idea and ordered through a cavalier approach, the illogical persistence of which displays poor operational grasp on air matters and the haughtiness of the newly acquired status. I say that because one of the reports in the media refers to the CDS's alleged comments that he will establish the ADC whether the Air Force likes it or not. So besides weakening the Air Force, another casualty of this unilateral approach would be the trust between the services. I wish to stick my neck out and state that the commander leading the Air Defense Command in future will have no operational role in war. The second observation that I have is the domains-based categorization of the envisaged theaters that also raises doubts regarding the very basic purpose of theaterization. Domain-based restructuring would invariably lead to service primacies, power asymmetries, and inclination to domain-dominant strategies adversely affecting jointness. Moreover, are domain-specific commands being created to exclude officers from a service helping the integrated commands? I don't know. The third is segregating Army Northern Command from the theaterization process. The CDS stated that while Western and Eastern commands would be set up, the present Northern Command would not be touched as it was deeply involved in counterinsurgency and had two active borders. Frankly, if that be the case, then Northern Command should have been the first to be theaterized to enhance operational synchronization. Northern Army Command, apparently, would also function directly under the Chiefs of Staff Committee, leaving unclear how the lines of command of the Air Force commander will flow. So not only is the effort piecemeal and incremental, but the entire process lacks the conceptual and operational clarity. Fourth is the concurrence of the service headquarters to be proposed to the proposed theaters articulated by the CDS. Now, consequent to the recommendations of General Shekatkar Committee, which had recommended the establishment of theater commands over the middle to long term, headquarters IDS was to have consulted the service headquarters in preparing a proposal and a roadmap for implementation. The heartburn seen in the services and the slugfest in the media over the process raises serious doubts whether the proposal was consensual or was a unilateral proposal made by headquarters IDS. Now, besides theaterization, there are some larger issues that need to be taken note of. And this I infer from the various comments of the CDS and the media reports. Would I be right to surmise? I will leave it to you. So all the theater commanders would report to the Chiefs of Staff Committee, of which the CDS is the permanent chairman. That changes his status from a mandated advisor to that of a commander. So there are now 4 issues. The changed status of the CDS will result in the fusion of the commander and advisor functions. From a principal military advisor, the CDS will become the de facto military commander. Second, the concentration of military power in the hands of a single officer needs to be viewed along with the power that the CDS draws from the office of the DMA, exercising authority over tri-service HR-related issues such as senior level promotions and postings. This amalgamated, unbridled power is without precedence. Whether this is desirable is debated. The third would also affect the division of authority in civil military power equations. We often cite the case of the United States. Now, the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff in the United States Armed Forces, who's the senior most serving officer, is prohibited by law from having an operational command over the armed forces. Fourth, preponderance of key commanders from the largest service at the high table of the Chiefs of Staff Committee and the theatre commanders, which is often cited to address issues where explanations are weak, will undoubtedly affect service-specific considerations and decisions of the services that are in a minority. So while the establishment of theatre commands is likely to take some time, the question that arises is, could we take some measures in the meantime to enhance jointness and improve our combat capability? There are mechanisms available for jointness, which could also be considered seriously and implemented through the office of the CDS. If implemented, the measures themselves would be able to address the aims of theaterization. I have 8 recommendations. First, emphasis on joint mechanisms. Air Force has been in the lead in reaching out to the other 2 services towards cooperation and integration. These joint structures exist in the form of advanced headquarters co-located with Army commands and the Maritime Air Operations Headquarters, the Naval Command. These need to be empowered. Second, joint planning sadly has been the bane of the armed forces and exists on paper in the academic institutions. The reason is that the services are predisposed to single service solutions. Hence, a serious attempt has to be made to address this issue. Third, unified strategy. Most of the times, the strategies are single service, resulting in siloed operation. This is because the services, irrespective of the contingency, want to be the drivers and be in the supported role. Reflections of this were found in the recent comments by the senior leadership. Fourth, joint language. Special attention and efforts are required to develop interoperable communications and battle management systems. Spiral integration and progress. The Andaman Nicobar Command is almost 2 decades old and has not been much of a success. Important lessons from the ANC experiment need to be factored in the development of theatre command. 6, there need to be simulations on theatre and non-theatre operations to establish that there is a quantum jump in the combat potential. We have a number of simulation tools that can be used for it. 7th, joint training, the need is well understood. 8th, now while internal performance inspections are a common feature within the services, very rarely are joint audits undertaken to assess the operational shortfalls in a joint context. What perhaps can be done is to organize a joint independent audit of our military performance in the 4 recent standoffs with China, namely Depsan, Chumar, Doklam, and Ladakh. In the case of Doklam, the later half. The audits would bring out a number of issues that would indicate our shortcomings that can be addressed. In fact, even a cursory study will bring out trends and patterns that may answer the reasons for the stasis in the Ladakh standoff, where we've been reduced to a strategy of expectation and hope. So to conclude, for theaterization, all stakeholders need to be taken on board. The process needs to be guided objectively by utilizing the strengths of each force and mitigating the weaknesses from the wisdom bestowed upon us by history and based on conscience rather than the consequences of which service gains or loses 3-star posts. History does not repeat itself to people who know history. Do we need to reverse the evolution of air power application for the sake of theaterization? The need of the hour is integration and not disintegration, whether to theaterization or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Air Marshal Soman. Let me please introduce our next speaker, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, PVSM, AVSM, SC, SM, VSM. He is an alumnus of the Officers Training Academy, Chennai, and was commissioned into the 4th Command in September 1977. In his illustrious career of 39 years, he has served in various types of terrain and participated in all major operations. He has served in important and sensitive command staff and instructional appointments. He was decorated with the Shaurya Chakra in Operation Meghdut. General Kulkarni has commanded the 26 Rashtriya Rifles Command, 11 Command, Mountain Brigade of Thwang, and Infantry Division at Likhavali. He is an alumnus of the prestigious institutions, including NIDS Japan and National Defense College, New Delhi. And he has also served as COS of Leh Corps and Eastern Command before being appointed as the Director General of Infantry. Over to you, General Kulkarni.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepa. Good evening, everybody. I think at the very outset, I must say, after having heard General Shekatkar and also Marshal Soman, and I thought I will now do away with whatever I had written to be able to speak, because there's a lot of things that emerge, and it seems to give a feeling there is a resistance to the creation of theaterization, primarily because it gives an impression, at least to me, as having heard, consultations have not taken. I would beg to differ. I think right after the Kargil Committee, ever since the discussions have been taking place, even as late as 2015, when the first address by the Prime Minister to the Combined Commanders Conference, he very clearly stated on the aspects of jointness. And subsequently, in 2017, when the presentation again to the Combined Commanders Conference was given at the Indian Military Academy, Dehradun, because the Combined Commanders Conferences were to be rotated at places so that everybody could meet at different places and institutions, and again, at least be able to visit each other more often on the context and on the pretext of the jointness. And therein also in 2017, a proper presentation on theaterization, and it was given none other than by the Naval Chief, who happened to be the Chief of Staff Committee at that point of time. There have been occasions when even the Army Chief could not get a chance to become the Chairman, Chief of Staff Committee. But notwithstanding all that, and therefore think that a lot of deliberations are taken, far more than what they should. Each one of us may be having reservations, and each one of us must put across their point. I was so happy to hear Air Marshal Soman at least articulating what he felt. We may disagree, that's a separate issue. At least he was able to put across his reservation. He was able to put across what he felt, that probably the theaterization is not what they were looking at. However, having said that, we quoted about a regimental battalion where there are people from all kinds of religion, but still all of them combined together into a battlefield. Just as a matter of interest, if there are 120 people of a particular religion in a particular battalion, there would be one, I wouldn't call it a leader, Granthi. If there were 120 Sikhs in that battalion, if there were 120 Christians, there would be a party, because I come from the Kamau regiment and the Naga regiment. So we have a lot of them. And similarly, if there are more than 120, they would be given a Pandiji to be taken care of. And similarly, if there were more than 120 Muslims in a particular battalion, there would be a Maulvi given. So the aim is to be able to provide not leadership, but be able to listen, hear, and be able to one point of contact for the entire thing, whatever that be. But whatever be so, India's size, strategic location, the kind of the trade interests in the security environment, and if we look towards making India, to transform it into a modern, prosperous, I would say, secured nation, there is a need for theaterization. And as what has already been brought about, there is no resistance, absolutely no resistance to the concept of theaterization. Now, what is that concept? It seeks to integrate the capabilities of the three services to be able to utilize them optimally and for future war. Now, the word is very, very well said, to be used optimally for future wars. If that be so, we all understand that the resources are limited. There is no denying the fact. Sometimes a lot of people would come around saying that, look, it is more of, not wanting to come under command somebody, or wouldn't want to be in location of another bigger service at some point of time. All that is definitely taken into our understanding. We all understand that the Air Force is no longer just a closed air. Understand. We also understand that it has the capability and the capacity of a multi-role aircraft. No denying the fact. What a fantastic, it's a decisive arm. Let's put it across. It's a decisive arm which can change the battle without fail. Having said that, if we have a certain amount of, say, a mindset we're wanting to turn, we need to amend that. Now, jointness, we refer again and again to the word jointness. Now, this jointness can only come not just at the NDA level or at doing this staff college level or subsequently the NDC level. It doesn't. That's only interpersonal relationships that can actually grow. Jointness in terms of training to be able to understand each other's doctrines, to be able to understand how we go about it, very, very necessary. I would put it that way, that we must not just, integration will come only if your jointness is there. And that jointness will only come when we understand each other. Even at the NDA level, where I was the divisional officer, I realized it after the 4th term, and finally when the cadet goes into the 6th term, he's into his service subject. And he's into his service. So he becomes an Air Force cadet, he becomes a Naval cadet, and he becomes an Army cadet. And therefore, he's in his respective silos he's moved into. And even subsequently, even into the respective services, the number of people who are ex-NDAs have drastically reduced, but each one of them have their own academies, wherein a large chunk of officers are taken in. So that there is a little difference. So jointness over a period of time expected had dropped. We can again further give a fillip. And even after the staff college, even if an officer from the Navy or the Air Force or from the Army will be posted to the respective branches, it is not with the view to be able to understand. And therefore, I would always recommend that, yes, it is not what would be looked at as a closer support. And we all understand that, as I repeat again and again, the entire concept of war is to be jointly. That is the first and the foremost thing. Everything has to be joint. Each one of us have to be in support of one another. And for long, this has been debated upon. And now the time has come. Of course, with Goldwater Act 1986, a lot of discussions have taken place. China has waited 30 years to see how the United States develops it and then creates, and even from the 7 military regions to be brought into 5 commands, 2 of their old military regions continue to remain the southern command and the eastern command. The eastern theater and the southern theater are exactly intact. What they call it, the Gyeongsa and the Nanjing, the military regions have remained as it is, no change whatsoever. And even in the central one, there's been a slight shift in the northern military. There's a slight shift from the Beijing military region to become in the northern state. As regards the western theater is concerned, of course, that's where the main crux is. However, ours, when we are creating our own theaterization, it is nothing. It's not cut, copy, paste of either the United States or the Chinese or the Russian or amongst the 32 nations that may have adopted the theaterization much, much smaller than ours. We have our own Indian characteristics fully aware. As I would put it across one way, let's put it a particular theater, let's say the northern theater, let's say the eastern theater, unless the eastern theater commander knows what all resources does he have ab initio, he would not be able to plan on. Much that we might be able to say, you just tell us the targets we will take on. That's a different story. But to be able to be involved in planning from the beginning at the highest level, when I say that, I mean it. If the army commander, the chief of staff, all the 3 co-commanders, everybody is seated there and the discussion takes place, and an officer who would not be able to take a decision at that point of time is also seated there, it makes a lot of difference. And everybody is together seated, together trained, understanding each other, the decisions are taken. However, the lien, you can have things over there, nobody has to be left out of battle. The resources which are there have to be utilized optimally for to be able to get the results and victory in a particular field. There is no denying of that fact. However, who takes the decision? It's a political decision. A political decision has to be implemented. If we were to say a political decision will be taken without consultation, it would not be fair. It's under consultation, it's under discussion, and for years on, each one of us has a reservation. Let's put a simple fact how the thing is. It's integrated headquarters of defense army, integrated headquarters of defense navy, and when the file comes in front of us, it will be air headquarters. What would that show? That the integration as yet has not been able to be taken in that fashion in which it is required, because there are reservations. And if there are reservations, they must be discussed. There is no denying, but not definitely in the open. Discussions, all differences must not be discussed out in the open. It must be discussed threadbare in the 4 walls and decided there and then as to what. Once a decision has been taken, for whatever the reason it may be, because all future wars in theaterization primarily for synergy of resources, for saving of manpower, for utilizing the minimal resources that you have, and also to get the bang for the buck that you're spending. The Shekatkar committee recommended it all along to say that theaterization is the view. First, the CDS himself becomes the overall responsible for operation. You see the Goldwater Nichols Act, and you see the kind of things that have developed in the United States when you have what you call as the National Command Authority. What is the National Command Authority? You have the President with the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council. You have the three services over there, the operational command over there. And finally, you have this Joint Command Chief. He is responsible for the entire, even though he's a one-point contact, he is responsible for the entire theater. That's what it is. Yes, there's a feeling that what would then be the service chiefs all about? The service chiefs also have a huge role to play in organizing, training, equipping, ensuring, all that the chiefs have to be doing. But then until and unless we have our mindsets changed for futuristic concepts of war and the kind of changes that are taking place in and around, and if they are fixed with our own, and then to say that we would not be against theaterization, but if there are so many stumbling blocks coming up in implementation of theaterization, that's where the things might be felt that yes, there needs now not too much of discussion, not too much. One has heard, one has said this thing, and this is where it is intended to go about it, and as rightly brought out, maybe the Northern Command is not being theaterized to begin with, and we are intending to theaterize the Western and the Eastern. Let us see how it goes about, whether it is call it the Air Defense Command, call it the Strategic Air Command, by whatever names it be so, and even the air doctrines which have been spelled out, it was in 2012, then 2016, the maritime doctrines have been spelled out. Each one of them have very clearly said how Air Force could be utilized and where definitely air campaigns of the kind. What is the dispute that exists? Who are our adversaries? Our adversaries right now, only two at the moment, Pakistan and China. What is it that we need to have? We have problems with them. Border dispute. What does that involve in? That ensuring that they do not transgress and keep salami slicing and capturing a territory. And therefore, what is the need? The need is to ensure the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the nation. We definitely do not have any expeditionary rules in mind. And therefore, to say that theaterization is not required because we have no, it is not like that. This is a theaterization with a view to ensure neither China nor Pakistan should be able to do what they want to do, whether cohesively or otherwise singularly. And therefore, the need to have the resources available, whatever the resources, minimal, optimally utilized, with a view to ensure that nothing of that kind would be entertained or allowed by the enemy. And in that context, all the three services have to utilize their resources to optimally utilize to ensure that that thing doesn't happen. It is not to happen. How do we prevent that? And what are we preventing? Do we have anything beyond the territory? Nothing. We have to ensure the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the nation, for which the land campaigns have to be supported. Or we will rather put it, even if it were to go the Gulf War way, to say 1,000-hour air campaign thereafter and 100-hour land campaign, so be it. As long as whoever it be, gets the victory to us, you require boots on ground to ensure that is there with us for good. And even when the air campaigns are on, even when the close air support or the part of the air campaign are on, the land campaigns are on, who is going to ensure and who will have no single service can win? It has to be a joint effort. And for the jointness, once the jointness is achieved, which I agree with Air Marshal Soman, that it takes a lot of time for the jointness, whether it be communication, whether it be logistics, whether it be cyber, whether it be communication, anything and every field that we are looking at it, we have to see it from the point of view of jointness, resulting in theaterization, and that theaterization is nothing but meeting together, ensuring together that whatever the task we have at hand, all of us can achieve it. To say individually, don't worry, you do your task, you give us the targets, we will ensure that it will be done. That's one thing. It may or may not happen. Let me put a small thing to you. There are times when I was posted in Taban, choppers can't just cross Sailor for whatever the reason it may be. the fixed-wing aircraft may not be able to cross because of the bad weather at that point of time. Now, let's look at Lanzhou and the Chengdu division. Lanzhou and the Chengdu military regions have been combined into one, the Western Theater. What do they have over there with them? They have two divisions of fighters, two divisions each of fighter. One of the military regions earlier had a transport division and yet another had a bomber division. In all, at that point of time, there are about 300 aircraft and about 72 bombers, and along with it, supporting a transport division to them. So they have a sizable amount of air cover being given to them. And what is the total number of aircraft? Generally, the Chinese have to about 2,100 fighter aircraft that they have of all kinds of generation. Even if we were to look at it that way, with 2,100 and the university that we see along with Pakistan, which has another about 400 fighter aircraft with them, we'll see to it that we are not to be found ourselves in a disadvantageous. And therefore, I go along with it with Air Marshal Soman that the limited resources that are available must be used optimally. But at the same time, as I say again, the land forces cannot be denied. The land forces will depend drastically on the decisive arm to give them victory. And that is only possible. So there, the area of interest, way out, you could give the, you can give the choppers entirely. The whole of it could well go entirely to the army, and the Air Force retains this, all the fixed this thing, and thereafter it works differently. Some options that I was suggesting, but notwithstanding that, theaterization, there is no denying the fact, it's a mindset which we need to change. And if not just the mindset, we need jointness first, thereafter follow theaterization. All of it would take time. It doesn't happen overnight. It may take years to understand each other and to be able to convert into a real, vibrant theater. Definitely. As I said, there is a resistance. There must be a reason for the resistance. And that reason must be addressed without fail. And we must see to it that it does not come out in the open whatsoever. It should not be seen as something like the number of vacancies being taken away or becoming under command somebody. No. That is not what it is. It is not an inter-services rivalry. It is nothing to do with anything of that kind. Everybody is on the same page when it comes to theaterization. If the reservation is on implementation, I think it is not very difficult. If all of us sit together and ensure that not just the Goldwater Nichols Act of 1986 are theaterization, are Indian characteristics to ensure that we win wars in future and we are not unwanted. And at the same time, the only purpose of all of it is only one, the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the nation. How we do it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, General. I request now to invite and introduce Rear Admiral S.Y. Shrikhande, AVSM IN retired. He was commissioned in the 1st of July 1980. In his early sea tenures, he was in Indian Navy ships Taragiri, LCU L-32 Rajput, and he has completed his ASW Weapon and Sonar Engineering PG course at the Soviet Naval War College with distinction. He served as ASW Ops Officer in INS Ranveer for nearly 4 years, wherein some new steps were initiated in combat effectiveness of some ASW systems and tactics. He was also in command of INS Nishank, XO of INS Delhi and CO of INS Kora. In his shore appointments, he was instructor of ASW School, Commander War Room, New Delhi. He was director of the Indian Naval Tactical Evaluation Group and directing Staff College of Naval Warfare. He was defense advisor in HCI, Australia. He commanded the INS Rajput in the Eastern Fleet. And on selection to flag rank, he was ACNS in Foreign Cooperation and Intelligence in Naval Headquarters. He was Chief Staff Officer C Vector at HQSFC, and he reported as Flag Officer Doctrines and Concepts for the Indian Navy based at Mumbai. He's highly educated, a very decorated officer, and has written several papers on professional subjects while in service. And he continues to write regularly for military magazines and speaks in various forums. Over to you, Rear Admiral Shrikhande.
Thank you very much. Jai Hind and good evening to you all. There are 6 specific issues I would like to touch upon in the 15 minutes given. First, the transition to joint commands and working functional commands is not going to be pain-free, as has been said by speakers, or trouble-free. This does not make it any less necessary, however. So there are 3 related points on this. Perfect is the enemy of good enough. We need not confound ourselves in trying to get jointness into a final and perfect wiring diagram. We can and must get it sufficiently right and make it work effectively. Some changes can be made later as we learn to make it better. This is what everyone else has had to do and continues to make course corrections in their own schemas. No policy, no strategy, or no organizational framework should be etched in stone. In fact, it would be ill-advised to do that. While several announcements and policy proclamations are rightly in the public domain, entailing public discussion, such as this one today, it does seem likely that the depth of internal, vigorous and rigorous discussions between the services and within different organs of the government may not have been as sustained and adequate. Otherwise, we couldn't have got to this point. This is the inference one may draw from the media, and that is all I'm depending on. This may have inadvertently resulted in seemingly good decisions being arrived at without the benefit of deep staff work, wargaming, and audits, and reviews, and even external advice that make for optimum outcomes. See, good decision making sometimes requires sagacity to make minor or major changes to decisions already arrived at. My second point is on the very early announcement of the intent to have an air defense command, which has been spoken about by Marshal Soman. I had written last year about some issues of why this might not be such a good idea. Today, I would like to suggest why this might have come about. At the tactical level, well coordinated and jointly configured air defense in the tactical battle area is important from the Army's point of view. I don't think the Air Force has anything but total support for that, even if both have to keep working out the tactics, techniques, and procedures for contextual effectiveness wherever it might be. However, it may not be right to extrapolate this requirement to a national military strategic level and create an air defense joint command. What is necessary at the tactical level cannot necessarily be replicated usefully for execution at the national level. Here, I would like to add a point made that it is less important to say that no one or almost no one has an air defense command at the national level. If it is truly a good idea, then it must be implemented whether anyone else has it or not. It does not seem to be such a good idea. A consequence of certain initial thought processes to assign some theater CNC's responsibility to an Air Force senior officer may have led to this decision, perhaps. I would not know, but I'm just guessing. I submit 2 problems with such an approach. One is that the underlying considerations, whether expressed or not, to have a ratio system of, say, three Army is to 1 Air Force is to 1 Navy, is not one that could be advantageous for strategic effectiveness, even when it might, of course, seem equitable in terms of cadre management, equity of flag rank ratios, etc. Next, once a decision like this is made, it becomes more challenging to think of a central theater where air power, including the coordination of air defense within it, can be envisaged. So my third point, and as a consequence, we see some impact of the tactical outlook that may have dominated thinking in the controversy over the term supported and supporting service, which has been brought up. The aspect of supported or supporting is very contextual and generally a consideration at the tactical and operational levels of warfare, and not at the military strategic level of war and warfare. That may have led us to extrapolate into creating an air defense command. Depending on the tasking, supported and supporting are very much interchangeable and are in no way to be thought of as primacy of one service or within a service, a particular arm, or of a slogan-driven assessment like tooth and tail. In many ways, warfare is changing rather rapidly in terms of sequencing, hardware investments to be used, and alacrity in 3 important areas for encouraging imagination and innovation, namely of people, ideas, and things. And this has to be a dominant part of what we want to achieve instead of being retrograde. Support, logistics, and other agencies were always vital. And here I may like to repeat what I have been suggesting. Here is my perspective as a sailor. In the Navy, we think of a submarine or a ship as a composite unit which goes into a fight as a hunting animal, fish or bird would. Its jaws, claws, body, fins, feathers, and tail all contribute to lethality, speed, range, conservation of energy, maneuverability, etc. The entire creature forms a killing machine, not just some part of it. I'm not trying to force fit an analogy or oversimplify anything, merely suggesting why phrases like teeth and tail, fighting arms and supporting arms, and services, etc., are often counterproductive in particular ways. Undoubtedly, the army operates in very difficult circumstances of border management, border skirmishes, and counterinsurgency in extremely difficult terrain. And we need to fully understand and recognize those challenges. However, the templates for joint deterrence and for looking and perhaps fighting deep into an adversary's environment as well as territory will require different thinkings, even beyond these difficulties, even if we do not hold any territorial ambitions on anybody else. You still have to fight deep to be able to prevent exactly that. All five domains of warfare have to come together when and where they bring serious advantage in terms of deterrence as well as winning in case deterrence collapses. These domains are, of course, generally five: land, air, sea, space, and cyber. My fourth point are a few words, therefore, about the need to transition from an air defense command to perhaps a central command as a holder of major air force assets and as a wielder of much of central air power needs on behalf of the CDS's eventual transition to exercising overall military command of the various joint theaters. This central command could also hold army formations that may also be held in reserve if required. It need not be only, even if mainly, about air power. At the same time, not every asset that the Air Force has can logically, in the heat and tempo of conflict, have a swing role. And we should not exaggerate that aspect. In theory, every fighting instrument and even a soldier or a sailor, a ship or a submarine has a swing role, except obviously that an aircraft has speed and reach of swing, which are quite different. There would be some assets that would be so committed that they may need to operate under one theater for much of the time. Also, there would be many assets that the central command could efficiently swing one joint command task to another, getting more efficiency into war fighting needs of more than one theater. So maybe there is a case to think of about reconsidering the thought of an air defense command and doing more thinking into a central command on these lines. There would undoubtedly be devil in the details, and there is, but the wrinkles can be ironed out. And as I've said earlier, perfect will always be the enemy of good enough. A related point about allocation or ownership of forces that keep surfacing in the media and on many debates that General Shekatkar was mentioning. In actual fact, all three services have always worked through attachments and detachments, accretions and depletion from forces allocated, depending on the taskings that emerge and the flexibility that is required. And for this, as the Navy says, via CHOP, that is change of operational command. Current self-created pressures of ownership or absolute availability of assets within a theater is not really reasonable or realistic, or indeed has been the practice in any of the services. The United States Central Command, for instance, which has been the leading command in the conflicts, the US has been engaged since 2001 in Afghanistan and elsewhere in the Middle East, is one of the smaller holder of assets and has done most of the war fighting with assets located originally and managed and administered by one of the other combatant and support commands like the European Command and the Pacific Command. My fifth point is a word about nomenclature of commands. Instead of using the words integrated and theater and then injecting words like maritime, air, etc., why not adhere to the system already followed in the nomenclature system of the senior service in India, that is the Army? Let there be simple, flexible, and anodyne names like Northern, Southern, Eastern, Central, etc., as currently exists, in fact, for all three services like Southern Naval Command, Eastern Air Command, and Eastern Command for the Army, etc. Theaterization, as such, relates to geostrategic rationales, and the command or commands that are created are only to address these issues for warfighting. The reorganization is expected to increase efficiency through better, smarter, and newer ways of using forces and all resources. Theaters have always existed. Theaterization need not be thought of as something new to us or anyone else. Fundamentally, the overlaps of single service commands looking at the same or overlapping theaters will now reduce drastically. For instance, 3 Army and 3 Air Force commands look at China presently. Likewise, 3 Army and 2 Air Force commands look at Pakistan directly. As someone has said, Geography is not joint, but warfare is. That is what is going on now. And all it needs is a bit more, all it needs a bit more of deeper thinking, sharp and dispassionate analysis, and then implementation, with a willingness to change that if required. My sixth point is a few quick words about the so-called Maritime Theatre Command, which I have suggested simply be called the Southern Command. The Navy always has had two operational commands up to 1971 and did not push to expand into a third, and in fact converted the Southern Naval Command into a training command. As per media reports, the two commands are to be merged into one command, and now correctly including the island territories, especially the Andaman and Nicobar group, which would operate in what would be multiple theaters depending on the strategic requirements and operational context. Some have said that there should be two maritime theater commands. My own view is that it is not necessary. As of now, the overall command of the two existing commands combined, that is a Western Naval Command and the Eastern Naval Command, combined or remaining separately tasked, rests with the Chief of the Naval Staff. That will devolve to the Joint Commander wherever he may be located. This Southern Command could contain designated Army and Air Force assets, even as it could be bolstered or depleted depending on situation. So, a related point is that all these new commands would actually find themselves working in close cooperation, coordination, and strategic and operational cohesion to deter one or more adversary or to win convincingly if deterrence collapses, as deterrence often does. Time does not permit anything more than highlighting some other aspects like distinguishing between integration as an input and jointness as an output, or recognizing the need, importance, and differences of single service, tactical professional cultures, even while leveraging them into jointness at the operational and strategic levels of planning and execution. This means that there are also no quick fix or symbolic answers to jointness, like more and more joint professional military education, especially at younger stages. We have actually a lot of joint professional military education, more than any armed forces of any major power. Jointness is about the substance of output and not really about the symbolism of input, insignia, or uniforms. Jointness, in other words, is not sameness, something that Air Marshal Soman also mentioned. Of course, jointness as sameness is grammatically awkward, but it is important to keep it in mind. And finally, we are on the right objectives. There may be some need to change the pathways towards those objectives, and we should do that with due consultation and in the near future get all things as right as is possible, be sufficiently effective, and be willing to change. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I now request your permission to introduce our last speaker, Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, PVSM, AVSM, SM, retired from the Indian Navy. The Indian Army. He is the director of St. Joe's, and he superannuated after 40 years of distinguished service in the Indian Army as Director General Military Operations, one of the most important functionaries of the Army. As DGMO, he was directly responsible for talks with his counterpart in Pakistan to ensure sustained ceasefire, a first of its kind, and was much appreciated by the national polity. His advisory skills in the strategic arena have played an inseparable part in designing and implementing numerous policies for the Indian Army. Lieutenant General Bhatia was instrumental in giving the much needed focus to the capability of development and capacity enhancement along our northern borders and effective management of the line of actual control and the LC. He has vast experience in disaster management, and he has been integral to the growth of the Special Forces of India, enhancing their operational capabilities. He was also the co-chair of the India-US Executive Steering Group on Defense Cooperation. Over to you, General Bhatia.
Jayant, and thank you, Dr. Deepa. Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Anyone give a thumbs up, please?
Loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Air Chief Marshal Naik, former Chief of the Air Staff, General Shekatkar, my fellow panelists, Air Marshal Soman, Admiral Shrikhande, Gen Kulkarni. It's always, it's always enjoyable speaking in the end, because what you want to say has already either been said or your thoughts and your structure are disrupted totally. So I like a good paratrooper, I'll try to gather my thoughts and put it in the details the brief which is given to me, which is basically contours the structures of integrated theatres. I think it's a very healthy discussion which has happened. It is to have discussions and deliberations rather than just a frank discussion. And I'm sure we'll find a suitable way forward. And I thank CKS for getting this together. Coming down to the integrated theatres, I will not call it integrated theatre commands. The mindsets are commands and theatres are theatres. So there is a little bit of a problem out there. What is the need? India today is a risen, responsible, resilient regional power, a global leader. And military is a very essential component of comprehensive national power. We have the second largest, let me divide it, army in the world. We have the Blue Water Navy. We have one of the best air forces, the air power in the world. We have everything going for us. We have successes everywhere we want. The military has achieved successes, unlike many other nations which have not. The 71 war was an example of jointness. Op Pavan was example of jointness. Maldives operation, where I was also involved, excellent, demonstration of jointness. You name it, we done it. Even Kargil, despite whatever people may say, I think we did a great job out there. So we should give ourselves a pat on the back and not say that we can't do it. But the fact remains that all these things were done at the personal level without formal structures. The time has come for formal structures. We should not deny that. We need the military has to transform from a force to a power. Despite everything we have, we are still a military force and not a military power. In keeping with our comprehensive national power, with the needs of tomorrow, being a global leader and the emerging world order post-COVID, we will have to ensure that we are a military power and we live up to the expectations and the aspirations of 1.39 billion Indians and India's aspirations in the international arena. How do we do that? That is the challenge. The second thing which I would like to say is, of course, it is not only, how do we transform? Is one, what do we lack? We lack higher defense organization. The reforms, and we lack integration. The reforms are in place. It's a political directive, whether you like it or not. It is there. It's a political directive. We should discuss. We should debate, and it is imperative that we get the structures and the contours right. There will be resistance, and there should be resistance, because without resistance, I think we'll fail in our getting things right. There should be discussions on that. We need a self-reliance in defense manufacturing. We import 65% of hardware. We need to correct that. So all these things need to be corrected. It's not only integration we should be looking at. We should be looking at the whole gamut of things which will transform us from a military force to a military power. Coming straight to the point, 2020 has been a year of disruptions. We had the COVID and followed by the China threat. China threat was always latent. It always was to manifest in the mid to long term. We were very comfortable with the Western neighbors, our adversaries out there in the West. Very comfortable. That is a comfort zone. Most of our combat power, whether it was Air Force, whether it was Navy, whether it was Army especially, were focusing and deployed to meet and mitigate the threat from Western rivers. China, we should be thankful to China for having changed that process and momentum, and has given us a respite, and where the Army, Air Force, and Navy performed absolutely well. We had a better deployment, equitable functional deployment. So we should not also be too apologetic about our systems. Systems have functioned well, continue to function well. The aim is to get it right. Now, I think the apprehensions are, and rightly so, that there will be three land-based theatres, one air-based theatre, one naval-based theatre. No, I think these are integrated theatres. Even if there's a Air Force or a naval theatre commander for the Northern Theatre or for the Western Theatre, for the theatre, so it's okay. But there's nothing. So at that level, I don't think you have to be at the tactical level and know how a post functions or how a coordinate search operations are done, or how do we go across, or how does at the operational level things move. No, we have to have integrated theatres, and when we say integrated theatre, fully integrated. I see no reason why someone from the Air Force or from the Navy cannot bring in good ideas. I think we'll have to look at such things. We should not look at theatres being specific to the Army, Air Force, and Navy. That will go wrong. We will need to transit. The transition management is very important. That is where I think Shekatkar committee should be taken into account. General Shekatkar is here. General Sanjay Kulkarni is part of it. I was also fortunate to be part of it. We have never bothered transition management, and that is where our weaknesses lie. We have to get the transition right, we got to get the structures right, and we got the controls right. So when you look at integrated theaters, what we're looking at? We're looking at today an air defense command. I think we should look at an air defense theater. We should look at a maritime theater. We should look at our continental shelf as different theaters because of the challenges, security challenges, because of the terrain, and because of the resources. What China has done is that after the COVID-19, the armed forces will be asked and tasked to do more and more in less and less. Let's, we can keep talking that we need 3% plus of GDP, we need so much of GDP. It's not going to happen. We have a former chief of the air staff here. We've got former very senior CNCs and others on this forum who have been through it. No, we will. Their priorities at the national level, the competing priorities, and we'll have to optimize the resources. How do we optimize resources? How do we get the structures right? That would be the challenge. Another thing I think, which is which we need to think through, is the rank structure. It is very important, but let's not deny that fact. Today, everyone talks about, and we have non-practitioners talking about it. That is, today. The armed forces have to live under media glare and media scrutiny. We have to learn to live with it. Everyone is writing what he wants to write. And we have so many people writing. Why does the need of 17 regional commands and 2 other commands, total 19 commands? Well, it is not a question of commands. There is a need to get a man out of the government of India, I think, is a major effort. You can't get an attrition of one man. And if these attritions have come over the years, there has to be a reason that they would have been justified. They would have thought through. It takes years and years to get a case through of any additionality in manpower. We all know that, we've all been through it. So we'll have to see if it is there, it is required. Now, how do we? We're looking at 5 theaters now. What is the final shape? I really don't know. But these 5 theaters look like an optimal structures. We cannot be having one theater for China because of our terrain fractures. These are fractured terrains. All sectors are terrain fractured sectors, mostly with single axis. Whereas the flexibility, the strategic reach of the air forces, and strategic reach and speed of the air forces there, the army has to move with the battlefield mobility at the end of the day. We may have operational mobility, the air force will do the strategic mobility, but in the end of the day, it has to be battlefield mobility. We have single axis everywhere. Ladakh, 2 axis. The Zojila Pass closed for about 100 days a year. We have the Manali axis, which is again closed for most of the year. We'll have to look at our central sector, which has again closed for most of the year. The eastern sector goes through a Siliguri corridor, which is the narrowest corridor in the core commander. There, it is the most threatened real estate. So, how do we combine that? And other than the northern theaters, we have our borders with other nations. Afghanistan, we don't talk about much. We have a border with Afghanistan, we have a border with Nepal, we have a border with Bhutan, Bangladesh. We have the largest land borders, 4,496 kilometers, and also Myanmar. So when we look at all these things and look at the security challenges which we have, we'll have to get the structures right. We'll have to integrate. It's a political directive given. There's no denying that, or else this structure will be pushed to us through non-practitioners, self-study experts, strategy experts, and we will come with a khichdi, and then we'll take years to resolve. We should look at the theater commanders as 4-star generals, air marshals, or 4-star chief marshals, and 4-star admirals. There's nothing wrong with it. These are required. They would have the resources. We should look at component commanders with the theater commanders as 3-star CNC level officers, because when they deal with so interagency, they deal with so many states. When they have to deal at that level, the rank does carry, the protocol does carry, the president does carry weightage, and we should look at CNCs as component commanders. So we have 5 theaters with 3 CNCs of one each from the service, who actually provide not only the advice, also the control. It's not that if an army is infantryman or a paratrooper like me who doesn't know anything about the Air Force and Navy is given the charge of the Navy, and therefore I don't have. No, I have advisors. I only have to do is get the advice and get the things right, get the priorities right, get the focus right, get the mission orientation right, get the role definitions right. So there are a lot of things to be done, but it does not happen. It will not be done. It can be done. So we will have to look at this component commander at CNC level. We should ensure that the resource allocation is done. However, the resources relocation is not done. because we cannot afford it. It is a resource allocation which could be divided, and we can sit down together and talk about a lot of things. So I think we are out of time. We have another 8 minutes left. I can go on and on how to go about it, but two things which are the basic structures, which are 5 theater commands or 5 theaters, and we get a high structure right because it is required. Otherwise, we'll be, for many years, the problem has been aligning authority and accountability. The accountability has been with the services, the authority has been the Ministry of Defense. Now, if we do not get the authority and the accountability right, we will keep doing what we are doing in suboptimal manner, what we have been doing. So we have to ensure that we get the structures right. Integration will take time, jointness will take time. It is not that we don't have jointness, we have had some very good operational successes in jointness, but formal structures are there. And to end on a lighter note, but a factual note, I'd gone to Hawaii on the invitation of the Recon commander, and they keep me very busy. So one fine day, there was some slot which is vacant, so I requested, can I play some golf? So they said, why not? So we played golf at 4 shots. So while playing golf, my 4 ball, which was also that, he said, we are not playing out there. He said, no, Navy, the US Navy does not allow the Army to play out there. So next day, when I was calling on the PECOM naval commander, he said, General, I believe you played golf yesterday. I said, yes, I did. He said, you're an avid golfer. I said, yeah, I'm not a good golfer. I'm an avid golfer. All right. He said, we got a very good course. You have played out here. I said, well, I thought you didn't let the Army to play on your course. He said, no, that's for the US Army, not the Indian Army. So the problems everywhere are the same. Whatever acts you have, the problem is the same. We should not get too concerned about it. I take a lot of pride in being a battlefield. First, I've been the DG Infantry. Sanjay Kulkarni with the DG Infantry. You give me a choice. I'll always vote for the infantry. But at some point of time, I think it'll have to be nation first and turf later. We'll have to get over it. I think we have a choice. This is a decision, a political directive has already been given, and it is incumbent on the hierarchy today to get the structures right. And it is also incumbent on the very experienced commanders and leaders who are in this forum. But I actually enjoyed both the naval and the Air Force point of view more than the Army, because having been with them for 6 months in the committee, I've heard their viewpoints. So possibly because not that their viewpoint any less. So we need to look forward, look ahead, and we should get it right within ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be forced upon with infirm structures, with not so good structures, and then we'll be fighting a battle all over again. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir. I now hand over to General Shekatkar for his summary and concluding commands.
Thank you so much, madam. Having heard the eminent speakers in the presence of very senior officers, including the previous air chief, there's hardly anything left to sum up. We must thank you. It's not a vote of thank everybody for joining us in this endeavor. Must thank CKS, Vinod Govinda, his entire team, MM. The 3 points. There's a need for all of us in the armed forces, as General Bhatia also mentioned this, transforms our armed forces into armed power. Our adversaries, they respect power, particularly our northern adversary. If we transform ourselves into power, that will send the right signal, and therefore the need for reorganization. Second one, we have seen from our experience in Afghanistan, we have not used the hard power, but we have used our soft power. So a combination of hard power, that is the armed power, and soft power must be now converted into smart power. That is what will give us the dividend and the result. Third, with the concept of Indo-Pacific region and the interest of number of powers in the world, or the nation in the world, India's role is going to be, or challenges are going to be increasing every second day. Therefore, we got to think on those lines. Also, the concept of Quad which is coming, that will put a lot of pressure on us. Whether we call X theater, Y theater, Z theater, it is immaterial, because national interests become first, nation come first, and nation will remain first. Last 2 points, if we don't agree, those who are taking decisions now, they may be asked to implement, as it happens elsewhere. Therefore, it is better to come to acceptable functioning system and take things forward. We cannot sacrifice our national interest at all, at any cost. And probably these points have emerged in today's discussion. the eminent panelists, as I mentioned, General Bhatia, General Kulkarni, but the members of this committee. We deliberately did not specify, I repeat the word, we deliberately did not specify which theatre command should come and what should be the composition. We did say there is a need for cyber command. We did say there is a need for space command. We did say there is a need for theaterization, theatre command, and we left it to those people because it would have been wrong on our part to start writing the composition of each command and the resources, which Marshal Soman said. So I thank you all for being with us this evening. We are grateful to you. I hope we have been able to collect our thoughts together and convey the right meaning. They've been part of this committee, so one knows what has gone into that interaction, briefing, detailed discussion with all the service chiefs, all the previous service chiefs, defense minister very often every 15 days, we've been briefing him, defense secretary, and all those who are powerful people who had to take decisions. And that's how that committee's report formed and was reasonably accepted well. Theatre command concept is there. As I mentioned, we deliberately did not say it is a Western Theatre Command, Northern Theatre Command, which command. That is part to be left together. So I thank you very much. We are grateful to you. I don't think there's much of a time left for any question answer. I will request, ma'am, you take over from here and just conclude the whole thing. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much, General. I now hand over to Professor Nagaratna to accord the formal votes of thanks. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good evening to all. Respected speakers and our most valued participants, as we come to the close of today's interactive program on integrated theatres, contours and structures, I take the privilege to extend our gratitude to all of you through my vote of thanks. I, on behalf of Center for Knowledge Sovereignty and my own behalf, extend sincere thanks to today's event speakers, Lieutenant General D Shekatkar, Air Marshal Suneet Shripad Soman, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, sir, Rear Admiral S Shrikhande, Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, sir. I thank each one of you, sirs, for the most enlightening and interesting group on the theme integrated theatres from various vital perspectives. Today's talk covered the theme most comprehensively, including from its historical evolution, including the evolution of the concept of the integrated theatre, its advantages, challenges, and perspective designing of the strategy and the basis on which the designing can be planned. Thanks to each one of you, sir, for the great and stimulating talk with diverse views, which has definitely helped us, the participants, to grasp the theme from different perspectives. A special thanks to our ever enthusiastic participants, which also includes esteemed officers from the three forces, for making this online event an extremely important one for each one of us. However, due to paucity of time, we were not able to take questions during this online event, but we would welcome your questions, which you can write to Ms. Deepa. I also thank the entire team of CKS, including Shri Vinit Goenkaji, Ms. Deepa, Srimati Sumitra Goenkaji, Mr. Paresh, for organizing this event and giving all the support that was essential to organize this event. Thank you once again. With the permission of the speakers and all the participants, to close this call. Thank you.